Hello and welcome back to another episode of Danny Regino Literature Club. And today we'll be talking about the two books I just read, and quite a contrast to what I read last month, if I'm going to be honest. Let me preface by saying that Danny Regino Literature Club is an occasional series I plan on doing about the books I've been reading over the past period since I made the last episode. I was going to do monthly, but I realized I'm kind of a fast reader. And I read two books this month, not too overwhelming compared to last month where I read like 700. The two books I read this month are Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn and Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. There's no common theme. Like, this is not like last time where I had a common theme and they were all Japanese. These are just two books I wanted to read, I guess. I really enjoyed the first Thrawn book, and recently I was thinking about the Interview with the Vampire movie, which is not that great of a movie, but because Mission Impossible came out, I was very much on a Tom Cruise high, and I don't know, I just wanted to read the book for some reason. Let's go into Thrawn first. Now, Thrawn is a book I pre-ordered, actually. I pre-ordered this book back as soon as I finished the first book, many months ago, which means that this episode has been months in the making. I've been waiting for this book for months, and mind you, I really enjoyed the first book, which is what inspired me to even pre-order the second book. I thought the first book was very well paced. It had me keeping the pages turning and turning and turning. Like, I was so interested in what was going on. And I was very excited to go into the next book because we see Thrawn, our Sherlock Holmes type character, interacting with Darth Vader, an iconic Star Wars icon, as well as you can tell by the cover of the book, Anakin. That's where the root of the problem is. The book leans really heavily on Anakin and Padme and prequel stuff, and not enough on what made the first book interesting at all. This book is bad. Sadly, I didn't want to say it. I didn't think I was going to have to say it, but this book is bad. Timothy Zahn is a talented writer. I have here on the shelf all of his Star Wars books, and I've loved pretty much all of them, except this one, because this one is bad. Obviously, I said it's bad 6 times already. But why is it bad? Anakin is written a cross between how he's written in Clone Wars and how he's written in the movie. So he's a good fighter, as he is in the Clone Wars TV show, but he's also retarded, as he is in the movies. He's super retarded and whiny, and he's just stupid. And they wanted to somehow make the Sherlock Holmes and Watson chemistry between him and Thrawn, but it totally backfires because he's just whiny and annoying, and that characterization even continues on into Darth Vader. In every media we've seen him in, every medium, he's vastly different character-wise to Anakin. In this, it's just not. So it's kind of annoying to hear inner monologue from Darth Vader and hear him talk as if he's a bitchy little Anakin Skywalker. It's poorly paced. The action is mildly interesting. The interactions between Thrawn and Vader only really get interesting by the very end, and even then it gets cut short with a nod and a wink for a sequel, which I hope they get to redeem themselves, because I really did like the first book, and it set up so many possibilities for this book, and it just totally just let it down. This is like a mildly interesting episode of the Clone Wars TV show. Not even a good one, a pretty forgettable one at that. There's 2 parallel missions going on, and it's implied the whole time that Thrawn knows Darth Vader was actually Anakin, or something like that. I can rant all day about it, but ultimately this is just a major letdown following an extremely successful and well-written book. All I can say is that I hope the next one, which I heard is actually put in hiatus, is much better than this. Why am I going to read it? I don't know. I'm very sick, twisted, and hate myself. 1 out of 5. The next book I read for Danny Regino Literature Club is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. This book was adapted into the well-known 1994 movie with Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst and Tom Cruise and Antonio Banderas. And it is written by Anne Rice, who she wrote this book soon after her daughter died. I believe it was some sort of coping mechanism, and she wanted to write a vampire story where it explores the intricacies of the emotional side of a vampire, which is our main character, Louis, who was turned to a vampire by Lestat, and there's another character who's a 5-year-old who was turned to a vampire. It puts forward some very interesting ideas, to say the least. This is also one of the first stories to show an emotional side of vampires, which was later adapted into those books in concept alone, and it's very interesting. And for the first few chapters, or the first half of the book, there's a lot of sexual imagery, and the whole time I'm reading it, I'm just imagining Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise as these vampires, and it's just super sexy. It's a good time. Eventually, the whole book degrades into Louis' character just bitching and moaning about the same things over and over and over and over, nonstop. He never learns any lessons. The whole time, he's just complaining and crying and being emotional the entire time. And there's even a character in here who lost her daughter and she wanted to become a vampire. It's a self-insert character by Anne Rice. And quite frankly, I did not appreciate it. So yeah, if you can't tell, I also didn't really like this book. Was it interesting? Yes. Did I read it all in the course of like 2 or 3 days? Yes. Did I close the book at the end and go, holy shit, 90% of that book was just our main character bitching and moaning about how he hates being a vampire and how he's different from the other vampires and he doesn't like it? Yes. Fuck. Another book I read for this episode of Danny Regino Literature Club fell flat. And it's not to say that this book is bad. It's definitely not as bad as Thrawn Alliances. As you may know, she wrote like 15 other vampire books. Side note, you know what really pisses me off is when cars have like those mufflers on the back to sound like a motorcycle or something, and they're just loud as fuck, and they make a lot of smoke, and it shows how little of a penis they really have. Now I lost where I was, but I'm pretty sure I was talking about how the fact that Anne Rice actually wrote a shit ton of books after this book, which are in universe. I'm sure those books explore the world of vampires and the weaknesses and a lot of stuff that's kind of set up in this book and never really answered. I'm sure they're probably answered in those books, but I'm here to read one book. I'm not going to read a whole fucking 20-book series just to find out what happens to my boy Louis and how he can die, because that's another thing. This book sets up ideas. It talks about how everything you know about vampires is not as you may think, and then it ultimately never answers those questions. Louis bitches and moans about it the whole book, and I'm bitching and moaning about it because that's not how you write a book. Like, imagine if in the Harry Potter books, instead of having 7 really well-written individual novels, you got 300 of them, and in the first one, they tell him he's a wizard, but they never show him Hogwarts, or they never show him what wizards can do. You just find out that he is a wizard, he complains about the Dursleys the whole time, and then the book ends. Now imagine if that was the first Harry Potter book. That is Interview with the Vampire in a nutshell. So 2.5 out of 5. Now that was the books I read for this episode of Danny Regino Literature Club. I don't know what I'm going to be reading for the next episode yet. I did get a recommendation because I put up a poll on my Instagram, and only really one recommendation stuck with me, and that was Kane and Abel. It's a novel, not the Bible story. Other recommendations I got were like YA novels or like craft book or something, and another one about Despacito. So I'm probably going to read Kane and Abel, maybe, and I might read the Despacito book. We will see. Is there any books you think I should be reading next month? Have you read the books that I read this month? I would like to know what you think in the comments down below, or on Instagram. You can follow me at Language of the Comic Nerd. And thank you for watching.
Every day I imagine a future where I can be with you. In my hand is a pen that will write a poem of me and you. The ink flows down into a dark puddle. Just move your hand right the way into his heart.